Hey, this is Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to talk about what made the Soviets so powerful from the 50s to the 80s in lifting. And it's going to be some things that you probably didn't think of, so stay tuned. The story starts in the mid-50s with Paul Anderson. Now, Paul Anderson was an American. He was the only American thus far to win an Olympic gold medal in Olympic lifting. And when the Soviets saw Paul Anderson for the first time, they were mesmerized by his level of strength and how powerful he was, and also how he was built. And they went searching for people like him in their population back home in the USSR. Now, what this started is a mathematical equation. The Russians started to look at the high jump, the triple jump, 100-meter dash, all the weight classes in Olympic weightlifting. If you start adding all of these things up, you're going to find that there are many, many, many more gold medals to win in sports that require anaerobic power than aerobic capability. So back in the Cold War era, what ended up happening was the Soviets started to realize that based on how many medals were achievable, they were going to put their focus on anaerobic sports. And that was really the end story of why they became so good. Now, how does this happen? Well, when they decided that they wanted to be an anaerobic powerhouse at the Olympics and there were more gold medals to win, they started dumping a lot of money, time, and research into the anaerobic power sports. This started with Verkhoshansky. Verkhoshansky was known as one of the godfathers of plyometrics. I got to speak with him a lot before he passed away a handful of years ago. Now, what the point is that Verkhoshansky started to figure out that power and strength were heavily related. He was starting to see that strength training with track athletes was making them faster at track. Conversely, they were experimenting with jumping and plyometrics with Olympic weightlifting and getting maximally stronger. Now, how this all became readily available was the fact that the researchers were constantly studying not 10s or 20 people like we do here in the United States. They were literally studying thousands of people that were living in barracks that all they had to worry about was train, eat, and sleep. And that's why there'll probably never be any data created like the Soviet Union created back in those days, because of the fact of controlling the athlete. You know, over here in the NFL, we can't control if the guys go to the nightclubs and party at night. That could affect their performance the next day. I mean, let's look at guys like Dennis Rodman. How good would a Dennis Rodman have been in basketball? Literally probably one of the best defensive players to ever play the game. But how good would he have been if he would have not been a partier? If he would have not liked staying out late? If he did not like doing things till 4 in the morning and then showing up at practice? He was literally that good with that level of lifestyle, which is unbelievable. So the point is that the Soviets controlled all of those aspects. Now, whether you believe in, how we do things in the United States and freedom of choice and all this other stuff, that's a different political statement. But if you're really, really wanting to study athletes, then you need to control them 100% as far as what they eat, what they sleep, and how they train. If you do that and you have thousands of people to study, you're going to find great ways to train. So here's where we get into why other reasons the Soviet Union were really good. They were instrumental at utilizing blood work in order to train. So what that meant is that they used all different sorts of tests, i.e. blood work, blood pressure, hand grip dynamometer tests, things of that nature to decide what was optimal in training, resting heart rate. So you really don't hear a lot about this stuff in training, especially in the anaerobic field, until you see the Soviet books from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, what we find, today, I would say 15 years ago, there was this really popular machine called an Omega Wave. And an Omega Wave basically measured your resting heart rate and told you what you could train that day based on your recovery factors. The Soviets were doing that kind of stuff back in the late 50s and 60s, meaning they were looking for optimization of training. And that leads us into the last thing I wanted to talk about with the Soviets, is they learned to optimize training. That's what made them so successful in the Olympic lifting category, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. By the time the 80s came along and Alexia was becoming more of a coach versus a lifter, which we would consider him the greatest weightlifter of all time, breaking, I want to say, over 70 world records in Olympic weightlifting alone. That's amazing. He was actually so amazing that he's the only lifter to win Athlete of the Year by Sports Illustrated. That's pretty impressive. Now, the point of that is that by the time Alexia had become a coach, he was the one that started to really develop the concurrent or conjugate system of rotating exercises. By the time he was a coach only, they had a meet called the Friendship Cup, which was the Bulgarians and the Russians. And at that time, those lifters had over 70 variations of the Olympic lifts that they rotated in order to train heavy year round. So what did the Soviets figure out? They figured out that educational rotation was the key to getting better, and doing the same lift over and over again, although may cause specific gains, would cause a regression long term based on the law of accommodation. So I hope this starts to help you out. We're going to do some history stuff here on some different videos, but I think that this particular Russian intro is so good because, back in the day when we were in school and kids, oh, the Russians were good in the 80s because of drugs, or the 70s because of drugs. In reality, that's not true. They poured all of their science and all of their methods and everything they knew into having hundreds and thousands of athletes and tens of dozens of exceptional physicists and researchers in order to dissect the Olympic weightlifting and the strength game. And that's why that they were better. And to this day, still, no country has matched how many athletes they have at that strength level. So stay tuned and we'll get into some more history at some later dates.